Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. It's great to have you along and I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. My name is John Pitcher and I look forward to spending the next 45 minutes or an hour also working through a number of the options that are available to us in Inventor 2026. Today's webinar is going to be focused around some of the new features and some of the items that hopefully you'll find valuable in regard to Inventor's workflows. I will be doing a bit of a broad spectrum today. We'll be touching on some very basic and introductory type topics, but also looking predominantly at the new features of 2026 and hopefully some tips and tricks that, that can improve your workflows and obviously make life a little bit easier for you working with Inventor. So we do run many of these webinars and it's something we do very frequently. So if you'd like to know a little bit more about these, we do have a site which I'll share with you in the chat. There's a link there in the chat, and with regard to the chat, if you'd like to pop any questions into the chat, feel free to do so during the presentation today. And I will mention shortly about our Q&A session towards the end. So yeah, once again, thanks for joining us and look forward to spending the next short while with you as we work through some elements and aspects of Autodesk Inventor 2026 version. Just a little bit about Accounts. First up, Accounts are a fully owned subsidiary of the French B2B services group Monier. Founded in 1906, Monier is a very large group in Europe and operates in construction, industrial and agricultural sectors. Accounts was established in 2018 with a vision to become the leading partner for digitalization of construction and manufacturing sectors. Today, through our partner to build smarter strategy, Accounts is a major global service and solutions provider to many of its target industries. At Accounts, we're dedicated to helping the construction and manufacturing sectors realise their digital potential. Our primary purpose is through a product called B-Smart software, which seamlessly integrates with extensive network of world-class technology partners. Being one of the largest professional services teams globally, we're dedicated to providing industries a comprehensive service that covers development, integration, implementation and training, together with a full suite of advisory services. We take very much a holistic approach to digitalization to provide your business with the right problem/solution fix. So just to introduce myself, I've got around 18 years experience in the CAD industry and the Autodesk channel. Prior to that, I spent 20 odd years in the manufacturing sector, working as a fitter machinist, mainly focused in the CNC space. I was involved in various aspects of engineering, hydraulics, pneumatics, general engineering, and even a few years in the food and beverage industry. My current role in Accounts is I'm technical support lead for Accounts ANZ team and the manufacturing space. I manage our support services and as an Autodesk certified trainer, I lead various training classes for a number of the manufacturing applications, mainly Inventor, but also Fusion 360 and AutoCAD. I also spend a bit of time in the additive manufacturing space, which is a personal point of interest for me. As far as today's agenda goes, just a brief outline of what we plan to cover. First up, I'd like to highlight some of the new features of the 2026 release. I've got a few slides and a couple of quick videos on this. I've picked a couple of key ones to highlight today, specifically items that as I said, I hope will add value to your workflows and be of interest to you as you work through the Inventor interface. Then we'll jump into Inventor and talk about a couple of key configuration settings. I'd like to talk about one or two hardware configuration items that I think you'll find useful. We'll talk about different elements of and demonstrate some of the new features and talk about some of those as we work through. And finally, we'll wrap up with a 5 to 10 minute Q&A session. So as I said earlier, feel free to pop questions into the chat. If there is anything you'd like me to discuss briefly towards the end, we'll make time for that. So as far as Inventor goes, obviously the concept of Inventor's system and working with Inventor's new features These are all driven by the community, actually, and Autodesk pride themselves in listening to their customers. And they do have some very interesting sites that I would encourage you to get involved in, particularly the one in the middle at the top there, the Inventor Community Inventor Ideas. Inventor Ideas is basically where you can go in as a user and vote on updates and new features that are available and that are planned for future releases. And what we can do is go in and add votes to what we think is important, and consequently Autodesk will apply that change. Obviously, there's other communities and forums that are also great, that are worth having a look at. So I'll pop this link into the chat as well. So you'll notice there's another link there to the Inventor Ideas area where you can go in and make suggestions as to how perhaps Inventor 2026.2 might look, or a new feature that you would like to see included in the software. So that's how Autodesk run that system. It is quite a good system, and I think for those of you that have been involved in this before, you'll agree Autodesk are trying to apply those particular elements to the new features. Okay, so as far as new features goes, there are about 140 enhancements or new features to the 2026 version of Inventor. Some really, really nice ones that I'll be talking about later, some that I think are really valuable and will help your workflows and make your Inventor experience that little bit more pleasing. So Autodesk have done a lot this year in relation to various elements in part modeling, assembly modeling, drawings. There's quite a new bunch of features in the interoperability space, so working with Revit and interacting more with Fusion and items like that. So we'll touch on some of those as we work through today's presentation. First up, obviously, Autodesk change things up as they go through, and there's been a lot of changes to some of these areas. So the new file open dialog, which I will highlight in a moment in our live demonstration, has quite a few changes to it. This looks quite a bit different these days, and there's quite a few updates and things that are quite valuable to us. So when we the workspace itself is it's quite nicely laid out now. It's a little bit more appropriate and a bit easier to find your way around. There's a bunch of options for changing and searching for data across your whole system in the left-hand side of this dialog. And you'll notice on the right side where we used to pick an options button and go in and pick model states or design views, etc., these are now displayed on the right-hand side. And if you select an assembly, there's an option that I really like, and I'm sure those of you that have been using Inventor for a number of years would also find this valuable. There's an option to skip unresolved links. So if you've lost a file or a file is, you don't have a complete assembly, you can simply skip the unresolved items on the far right side. You won't see it in the view I've got on screen at the moment, but certainly in the assembly type situation, you would have that option. So there's quite a few options there for deferring updates in flat patterns. All of this is now displayed directly on the file open dialog. So it's nice Autodesk have made some updates to that. Obviously, we can multi-select in this area as well. So we've got options to pick, hold down your Shift or Control key and select 5 files to have Inventor open all 5 of those files, one after the other in an automated fashion. So just remember that little, that's a handy little tip as well. There's been a number of changes to the file new dialog as well, guys. And quite a few options here where we can go in and select from our template. So we can copy and paste paths to this particular dialog. But also notice if you pick in the top right corner, there's an option there to go in and look at your templates. And again, anybody that's been using Inventor for a while knows the previous workflow for creating a new template was that we had to go into File, Save As, Save Copy As, etc., save as a template. But now we've got an option right here on the Open dialog. You can see the little new button here, which allows us to see the option to create a new template. So quite handy that they've brought that into the main area of the Inventor Open and File New dialog. Okay, probably of all the features in Inventor 2026, this is potentially my favorite. I've got two or three favorites actually, but this particular one is has been a little while coming. Autodesk have been talking about this for a little while, and they've got this over the line this year. And there's some really nice functions in the option to have irregular pattern distributions. We all know that previously we could go and suppress objects, we could go and suppress instances within patterns. I'm sure those of you that have been using Inventor a while, if they've worked out that. And there was some really nice options for doing a pattern via a path or along a series of points. But Autodesk, this release, have changed up the nature of the rectangular and circular pattern tools. So there's quite a neat little bunch of functions that actually allow us now to have irregularly spaced patterns. So quite handy that we can do this, and I've got a little video here that will run through this. So yeah, quite a nice bunch of options that we can now go and use the patterning dialog to allow us to change the instance positions. So you'll see there we've got this option on the dialog now for a regular distance, and that simply allows us to go and set instance or irregular spacings both in circular and rectangular patterns for each of these options. Very, very cool little feature that Autodesk have added this year. So I think you'll find that one quite valuable. We'll talk about that one a little bit more, and I will do some little demonstrations on how that works when we come to our live demo in a moment. The simplify command in Inventor is one of those ones that you may or may not have used. It's quite a powerful tool for simplifying complex shapes, especially if we are interacting with the likes of Revit and pushing some of our models out to the Revit space. The simplify command can now be accessed in the part environment. So this is a completely new option. So we can now simplify an individual part component, which means we can suppress out graphic intensive items like patterns. I'm sure you've all come across situations before where your model takes time to load because you've got many, many patterns and patterns of patterns, which obviously does put a lot of pressure on our CPU and GPU. So we've now got the option to simplify and to potentially just deliver the level of detail for that particular part. So there's options to exclude bodies. We can exclude or remove features, just like we can in an assembly with the simplify command there. Again, all of these options, guys, are talked about in much more detail in our training classes. So please do jump online and have a look at the various modularized training that our accounts team deliver as we work through. So here's a little example of a component that is simplified. So I'll step you through this little video where we've got a screen, obviously, that we're looking at, and yeah, this option here to simplify the 3D model to actually remove or take out, a bit like you might do with a derive function, or you might do with a simplify assembly type mode, but we can do this at the part level now. Quite nice, very nice that we can dumb things down and obviously make our Inventor assemblies work faster, and perhaps even hide some of our intellectual property at certain levels of the part mode. So I think you'll find that little feature quite nice. There's a lot of options in there. As far as sheet metal goes, just continuing talking about our part environment, the sheet metal space in Inventor has changed over the last couple of releases. Obviously, Autodesk are in the process and have almost finished rolling out a complete new series of dialogues. So these dialogues changed quite a lot with the 2025 release, and Autodesk have continued to roll those out now, where we've got much more interactive in-canvas displays. We've got a number of different options now for contour flange, corner rounds, and punch tools that are in-canvas tools. So we've got the push-pull arrows and a bunch of options there for doing that. I won't be going into any detail. I did actually run a webinar back in January on the bit more of a deeper dive on the Inventor sheet metal space. So feel free to have a look for that one. You should find that on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. So there is a lot better options here in relation to sheet metal modeling now, a little bit more interactive and a lot nicer dialogue layouts, etc. So what about the assembly environment? Well, here's probably, and again, I mentioned my favorite being the irregular patterns. This is potentially the next biggest thing in Inventor 2026 release. This particular button here that I've got up on screen at the moment allows us to mirror components and retain constraints. This is something that Autodesk have been working on again for a little while. Obviously, with constraints, we've got all sorts of potential issues and flow-on effects with orientations and where is 0 degrees and where's the horizon, etc., etc. But with the new feature, we've got a little button up in the top left of the dialog there for mirror components, where we've got the option to do an associative mirror or to mirror with all the constraints. Now, this option has been there, but it was a little bit hit and miss. The option in the bottom left of that dialog was there for some time, but for anybody that's been using Inventor for some time, you'll know that, again, Inventor struggled with the concept of where the 0 was, or where the origin was, or where the horizon was, or where was 0 degrees. So there's quite a few options in this new area. We've got an option to create a flat assembly, or we've got the option to create an associative mirror as such. So like I said, this is one of those tools that that has been worked on for some time, and Autodesk have delivered now and created this really nice option to mirror our constraints as we mirror an assembly. So again, I think I've got a little video here for to show this one. So effectively, you can see an example here, and I will try and demonstrate this later on. I did have some drama with it. Zoom doesn't always play kindly with Inventor, both being fairly graphic intensive systems. So yeah, there may be a challenge. I did run through this previously in preparation for this webinar, but as soon as you join Zoom, it tends to want to lock up. So I'll certainly explain that as we go through. So Zoom and Inventor are not necessarily best of friends, just purely because of their the nature of the graphic interface. So yeah, quite nice that we've got the option now to yeah, mirror assemblies and retain our constraints. So quite a nice tool for doing that. For those of you, again, that have been using Inventor for a little while, you might know that in 2021 release, Autodesk released a fairly major element of their software, the Inventor software, called model states. Now, model states are quite an important area. They replaced what we used to call level of detail, for those of you that were using Inventor prior to Inventor 2021 version. So model states are very, very powerful. Model states are something that we've got either in part mode. We can use this for like a cast state of a component, and then maybe machine operation 1, machine operation 2, machine operation 3 as separate model states to perhaps stage up our manufacturing process, for instance, or something of that nature. So model states are a very, very powerful tool. And we can use these obviously at assembly level, where we can set up model states of maybe we're making some type of machine and we want to show our machine in a range of different situations, or a range of different development levels, or something like that. We can certainly use model states to do that. Model states are very, very powerful, and I will give you a little bit of a demonstration potentially as we go through a little later on, if we've got time to explore that one a bit. But yeah, very, very powerful tool that allows us to set up various iterations and assembly configurations within the file. Basically, the functionality is not unlike how we used to use iParts and iAssemblies, but it's all done within the one unique file. So we don't have multiple members as such. We simply are making a change to the configuration of the actual assembly itself. Quite a nice tool, and I think you'll find that one quite valuable. Again, all covered in our Inventor training courses, and we run those frequently if you'd like to look up online when our next one will be. As far as Content Center, Autodesk have improved the favorites area. Again, this is an area that I quite like and use frequently. Quite handy to be able to define local and shared favorites within the new system. There's quite a nice option here, and certainly the favorite groups can be very handy to make things a whole lot quicker. Again, configuring Content Center is a bit of an area that's yeah, something that we can certainly help with. It's quite a lot going on in this space, and obviously we can create our own libraries of specific bolts, nuts, or washers. You might have a mil spec bolt or something that isn't in the Content Center by default. The Content Center itself is towards 1 million parts now. There's many pre-modeled and configured parts within the Content Center, and we can obviously make modifications to that. We can drive our own families into that situation, especially if we're using things like aluminium extrusions or anything of that nature. So it's very good to be able to populate our own families and our own items into the Inventor's Content Center system. As far as bolted connections go, there's a bit of an improvement here in the 2026 version. Previously, what we used to do with this was just specify that it was an M5 thread or an M8 thread or an M10 thread. Autodesk have now opened this up so we can specify a metric fine or a metric standard type situation. So we get the option now to specify the pitch of the thread that we're using for our individual bolted connections. Bolted connections are definitely something worth exploring if you haven't already. They're under the Design tab in your Inventor space in the assembly environment. One that I'd like to just highlight is this option down the bottom here, where we can save a set, like a bolt, a nut, a washer, and a spring washer, say, almost like a sub-assembly, and reuse that. Highly recommend you explore that one, guys. Again, it's something that that is definitely worth playing with as you try and improve your processes and your workflows with the Inventor software. Okay, moving on to drawings. Again, a couple of minor changes in drawings. There's 2 or 3 things in here that are quite nice that Autodesk have added. They've changed and updated some of the items for working with breakout views. So when we create a breakout view, the nature of the this particular one is a detail view, obviously, but we've got the options there for the detail cutout to allow that to populate correctly. The other really nice one is this option here now, where we can specify the position of the break line via the sketch. So you'll notice in here we can go and dictate where the break line is on a foreshortened part, or a part that is, you know, if you've got a 6 meter long beam and you've got some hole details on each end of that beam, you don't necessarily want to show the middle 4 or 5 meters, so we can cut that away. That option has always been there, but we've now got the option to say, well, I want to display 500 millimeters of the left-hand end and 750 millimeters of the right-hand end of that beam. So Autodesk have allowed us, they've opened that option up now to be driven by a sketch. Now, this little tool here is quite a nice one, guys, and this is a new function that we've got in Inventor, where we now have an option to create a new type of dimension, and I'll stop this video in a second and just explain. So effectively what this person is doing here, you can see there in the dimension type option, we've always had the angular foreshortened and angular length foreshortened, but Autodesk have now added this one called angular sum. Again, quite a nice little option, because and again, I'll play this through. Apologies. I'll let this play through this time, and you'll see what I mean. The concept is that we can set up to have this angular sum dimension, which produces this sort of option. So yeah, quite handy that we can work with dimensions like that. So it's a completely new option that they've added now, where we can have a group of dimensions with a total value as such. Okay, 1 or 2 little features here as far as assembly display and hiding items. We can now use Alt-V as a hotkey for hiding or displaying different items within your assembly. So some quite nice features and options there for working with all of those various items. So yeah, quite a nice bunch of options for working with assembly display within a drawing environment. Okay, another little option, I mentioned that Autodesk have done quite a bit of work in the Revit interoperability space. There's a really nice new iProperty added this particular release. Autodesk have obviously been working on this for a number of years, and there's been some really good improvements since about 2020, actually, in the whole interoperability with Revit specifically, but also with Fusion and other systems as well. So Autodesk have updated the properties area to now include a new property called Revit category. This is quite cool and quite handy, and I will demonstrate how this works, but effectively you can see there in the iProperties for your Inventor models, you've got the option now to display a Revit category, whether it's going into a columns category, or it's going into a cable tray category, or whatever it might be. And these are all the standard categories that are populated and talk obviously to your Revit software. So there's a lot going on in that space. Again, Autodesk have actually done a couple of other little improvements here. They've added a new placement option where you can select the Inventor model in its current orientation and an insertion point that will align it with a specific geometry in Revit, which is kind of cool. So if we're importing or exporting to and from Revit, we've got options to work together this way. So this is a pretty big space for Inventor. They're obviously doing quite a lot in the background with the whole Revit interoperability and some of those tools there. So for those of you that are working in this space, maybe this one deserves a webinar all of its own. So it might be something we can look into in the future, is to potentially demonstrate some of the functionalities that Autodesk has here. Quite an exhaustive area. I will just touch on that as we go through our live demonstration shortly. Okay, so as far as, I think we've got a little video on this one where we can see the iProperties being used here. So yeah, that Revit category option that I mentioned, and we won't, so we can set up each of these and drive them into a particular category. And then when we go to the bill of materials, we can set that obviously and arrange that to be shown as such. So when we go and export that particular item out, we can obviously export out and have Revit understand and read from those workflows. So yeah, we can set up our placement, as I said. We can set up the alignment options, and then we can export the information out and go from that particular scenario. So yeah, quite cool that we can just go and use those in Revit. Again, only available, I think, in Revit 2025 and 2026. So yeah, if you're still using an older version of Revit, some of these interoperability functions are limited in that space. All right, just one other minor one here. If we've added 3D annotations to a model in Inventor and then we export it out as a JT, a step, or a other formats, we can certainly take with it those 3D annotations. 3D annotations are quite a growing area in Inventor. It's an area that's certainly worth exploring. We can obviously annotate in the 3D space, and we can also analyze annotations and analyze our model for interference or clearance in the Inventor space these days. So there's a really nice tool, an Inventor add-on called tolerance analysis, where we can go through and do an analysis based on that particular function. All right, that's it for slides as such. What I'd like to do now is jump over and head into Inventor. And what we're going to do first up, I will be, I'd like to demonstrate 3 or 4 things, and we'll talk about a number of different items and options that we've got in relation to working with Inventor's system. So first up, obviously, I'd like to just talk 1 or 2 little basic things that you may or may not be aware of. You might have noticed, and I'm sure those of you that have been using Inventor for a while would have noticed these before, but these little orange dots that we get on our screen, these are related to the new features. So effectively, we've got this option under your tools menu and highlight new. Basically, the little orange dot is highlighting to you that on the model tab, there's some updates to the rectangular pattern and sketch driven pattern, hence these little orange dots. So if you're wondering what they are, and if they annoy you, you can go and turn them off just by unticking these options here under highlight new on the tools menu. So that's just a little item. And if you've moved from 2023 version, if you select this button, it will then highlight the items that have changed since 2023. If you're a 2025 user and you're moving just from 25 to 26, obviously we pick this option here. So we can hide these just by unticking them if we don't like to see them. All right, as I mentioned in my opening slide, I briefly talked about a couple of options with regard to working with some hardware configurations. What I'd like to just highlight, and just going to pop in, if you do a search in your Windows for graphics settings, you'll end up with a dialog that looks like this. Now, if you're working on a laptop or a workstation laptop, often workstation laptops have a number of video cards or GPUs, graphic processing units. The idea of that is so as we can use a low intensity graphics card when we're working with Word or Excel or emails or whatever. And then if we're using something like Inventor, we can set it to use a higher, the higher powered graphics card, which obviously will use more power. And look, laptops these days are a little bit orientated around power saving and getting the best life out of battery. But if you're placed at a desk for most of your time and you've got a laptop, what you can do under the Windows settings is we can go in and set our graphics to force Inventor to use the high performance GPU. So by default, when you purchase a Dell laptop, which is what I'm using today, it will generally be set to power saving mode. And what that does, by default, it will use the onboard graphics card, which is a lot lower power, until such time as it needs the high performance graphics card. Obviously, they're trying to optimize how much life you get out of your battery. But in that millisecond of switching, you can actually get some problems in Inventor, as in Inventor may be a bit laggy and you're sort of thinking, what's going on with my Inventor? Why is my Inventor actually doing this? It's because it's switching from the low-powered graphics unit to the high-powered graphics unit. And I do find a lot of people aren't aware of this fact. I have actually written a document on this, and it's in our knowledge base. But yeah, effectively, what we should do is go in and force Inventor to always use the high-performance graphics card. Unless, of course, you do require your battery to last a whole lot longer. If you're sitting in an airport for 4 hours or something and you want to get better life out of your battery, obviously we can go and change this back. But if you're sitting at your desk 90% of the time, it's much smarter to go and change Inventor to do that. So yeah, as I said, if you just simply type into your Windows search, if you type in graphics display, it will come up with yeah, this particular dialog where we can go in and force whichever version of Inventor to use the high performance graphics card at all times. All right, that's one little item. The other one that I'd like to just briefly mention as well is with regard to page file size. Now, some of you may have come across this in the past, but this one, if you search in your Windows search field for system, you'll end up with a dialog box that looks a bit like this. Now, this particular system is our system tells us all about our machine, etc., and we've got some advanced system settings options here. So when we go into the system area of Windows, we can obviously change a bunch of things. Now, by default, page file sizes are frequently set based on the amount of RAM you have. Now, we were always taught, especially when we only had 4 or 6 or 8 gig of RAM or whatever it might have been, that really your RAM, your page file size, which is like a switching area, can allow us to improve our performance and change this. So on this particular area, if you go into your system properties and then pick this advanced button here, you'll notice, just move this down. So if you pick this advanced system settings and then go to the advanced tab, and under the performance heading here, you've got this settings dialog. Again, under advanced, you'll notice here it talks about virtual memory, and this is the page file size. I've always been taught that the best way or the best option is to have this about 2 to 3 times your RAM allowance, provided you've got that amount of space on your C drive. This is something that Windows Systems does when it's doing processing and calculating all its math code, which obviously Inventor does a huge amount of. This particular tool allows us to have more of an allowance on the C drive to switch to. So the page file size, you can just click on change here and you can set up your page file to be, like I said, best to have it 2 times. This is set by default, so you can automatically manage. And what that will do is set it to 1 times the RAM amount. My preference is to have it 2 to 3 times. In here, you get options then to set that accordingly. So yeah, just be aware of that. You will need to reset your computer if you make a change to this one and do a restart, but you will notice a vast improvement in the way Inventor behaves, especially if you're working with a machine that has less than, say, 6 or 8 gig of RAM. Obviously, a lot of us today are working with 32 gig of RAM or 64 gig, or depending on what your particular scenario is. All right, 2 or 3 things I'd just like to briefly mention before we jump in and look at some other things in Inventor. One area that I'd like to just highlight, again, graphics cards are a fairly important part of how Inventor performs and behaves, and it's good to understand a little bit about these. Up here under the little drop-down arrow to the right of your question mark in the top right corner, under the help menu flyout, we've got this option here to find recommended hardware. Again, those of you that have been using Inventor for a number of years would be very familiar with this, but for those of you that might be new to the system, going to that particular link allows us to search for the hardware that Autodesk support. And in here, we can find certified drivers, we can find all sorts of different things that Autodesk have tested. I'd highly recommend you become familiar with this particular site. It's definitely worth looking at. So again, just in the little drop down in the very top right, under help and then certified graphics hardware. If we go into this area, we can look up a specific Dell or HP or Lenovo machine. But if you want to look specifically at NVIDIA graphics cards and as to which one is supported, we can go in here and say I'm working with Autodesk Inventor and my version is 2026. In actual fact, we've only got 2025 at this point. Autodesk is still doing some testing on this. But here's a list of all the NVIDIA graphics cards that Autodesk support for use with Inventor 2025 in this case. All right. So if you are looking at upgrading your machine or purchasing a new laptop or desktop machine, highly recommend you become familiar with this and buy one of the cards from this site. Some of these are quite cheap, again, depending on the amount of RAM. A lot of them are they can be quite expensive if you're talking, 12 or 16 gig of GPU RAM, or there is a couple on here with 50 gigs of RAM. You'll have to give your right arm for those ones, but we can set in here what particular card we're using, and if I tick this one here, then we can go and tell this site we're using Windows 11. Whatever it might be, and we can pick here whether we want certified or supported cards. And what this tells me is the actual driver that I should be using here. Really worthwhile coming to understand and to appreciate that. So again, just up here in the top right, the little drop down, wait for the flyout, find recommended hardware. Highly recommend you, if you are looking to buy a new system, that you actually consider one of those cards. If you want a flawless and supported Inventor experience, highly recommend you consider one of those particular cards. Okay, now I've touched on a couple of items in our introduction and in our couple of little videos there. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to move on and talk about some other new features. As I mentioned, in the File New dialog, when we go and pick up to open a particular assembly, here. Seconds, just while I get this this particular. So when we go to, I'm looking for drawings. Okay, so down here is the area where you can set the type of file you wish to open. Sorry, I did go and look for a drawing earlier, which is why I set that. And that's why I can't see any of these items here. Okay, so what I was going to look at is when I go to open an assembly in Inventor. Obviously, over on the right side now, we've got all these options that we would have previously had in the little options button down here. Autodesk have populated all this into the dialog. And the one that I think is really valuable is this skip unresolved files. What this one does, rather than bringing up the dialog that says, you know, what do you want to do with these missing bolts, nuts, or washers, or whatever it might be that you've lost, or that maybe somebody's done a save on your system or you've lost some files, we can skip the unresolved files out right now before opening the actual assembly. So kind of cool that we can do that. So there's yeah, quite a nice bunch of options there. As I mentioned, so on the open dialog, we've also down the left side of this dialog, we can go and search for other areas in our drives or in our network, depending on what we're actually working on here as to what we would like to do. Obviously, our workspace button at the top here just takes us back to the area where our project is determined. So up in the top left of your screen here, you've got the projects area, and I can click in here and take me straight to the projects area. We've obviously got that as well on our ribbon when we go back to the home page, which I'll show you in a moment. So we do have a number of options there, a number of changed and moved options as far as file open. As I said, the file new dialog has had a bit of a makeover as well. So when we go file new, up in the top right here, we've got options to open from a path or open from a particular location. And yeah, we've got a couple of little buttons there. And like I said, we can obviously go here as well and pick up our templates or whatever it might be that we might like to explore or work with. Okay, now 2 or 3 other items. Yeah, we've got a bunch of options there with regard to working with that. Now, one other little tip for those that may be completely new to Inventor, and again, I'm sure those of you that have been using Inventor for some time, you just have to, yeah, this one probably won't be overly relevant, but for those of you that look at a part in Inventor and you go, oh my goodness, how was this particular part created? You know, how did they actually work with this? For those of you that may not have used Inventor in the past, one of the best tips as far as when we come to creating an Inventor file is obviously here's our browser with the history of our part. What we can do to look at how this particular file was created, we can drag our end of part marker right to the top. And then we can basically play through and look at how this part evolved. So effectively what this person did, they sketched the profile there and they created a revolved or a revolution component. And then they went on down and created a series of holes around the flange at the end there. We can just drag this end of part marker through to watch our part evolve as it was created. Again, for those of you using Inventor for many, many years, that will be obviously not a new feature, but something that's quite handy and quite important for those of you starting out to Inventor. Now, I did mention with regard to the bill of materials, and again, those of you that are already using Inventor, hopefully you're making good use of Inventor's bill of materials functionality. But like I said, we've got over here on the right side this option to add, and obviously for those of you that are new to Inventor, here's all the iProperties that are default iProperties that have been in Inventor for years and years. So we can assign quantities and costs and different things. So all of these are properties that live as metadata with each of our Inventor files. But like I said, the one that's been created as a new feature is this Revit category. So for those of you interacting with people in the Revit world, this is a really, really nice tool now because we can obviously assign a Revit category and have that populate into our bill of materials, which can then also be populated onto our drawing sheet. So very nice that we can do this. And yeah, certainly you can see here the option. When we look at this drawing, we've got this Revit category now that we can display on our parts list or anywhere where you use your iProperties within Inventor. Again, creating these types of drawings, guys, for those of you that have been using Inventor for some time, very much a simple function. It's a very quick and easy process. One or two other little things that you might find valuable, which, yeah, I thought I might just highlight as well. If you're placing a view, and I find a lot of people aren't aware of this, if I was placing a view of a component onto my drawing sheet, and we'll just pick up one of these items here. Let's go and pick we'll just pick up this blade, for instance. We'll pick something a little bit more. Yeah, we'll pick this item here. So when we go to place a view in on a drawing in Inventor, we've got the options, obviously, to set up the scale and all those sorts of typical things that we might be required to do. So we can set whatever scale we like. But one thing I find a lot of people miss is this funny little down arrow here, guys. This particular down arrow is quite an important tool when we come to placing drawing views, because with the down arrow, we can actually go in here and set a custom view orientation. Again, this is something that a lot of people miss or haven't seen, just purely because it's sort of hidden away under this little arrow in the bottom right of the view cube here. But if we go custom view orientation, what this enables me to do is actually set. So maybe I want to be able to see this, and it's not, you know, one of my isometric views or my front or top or left or right view. We can actually go in and set this as the orientation of the view that we would like to appear on our drawing. So yeah, this little drop down arrow, and under here, custom view orientation. Very, very handy little tool that you may find valuable. Okay, one or two other things I'd just like to quickly talk about. As far as drawings go, obviously, for those, again, using Inventor for many years, you'll be familiar with this, but we can obviously go and retrieve dimensions and add center lines and all sorts of different options here. We've got options to just bring in our dimensions. We can do a range of different things with regard to our dimensioning. Obviously, annotating and dimensioning is quite a tedious process traditionally, but with the retrieve option, so you've got up here retrieve model dimensions. This is pulling dimensions from the model. Now, as per the normal, placing these onto the drawing will always be a little bit of a challenge, but we have this arrange button up here where we can go in and say, I want you to arrange these dimensions as per maybe the ISO standard or as per whatever standard it might be that we've used to create our drawing. Now, it doesn't always create them 100% correct, but it does a pretty good job of actually creating dimensions in a way that is much better laid out than normal. So that tends to be my default workflow when I'm dimensioning or creating a drawing of a particular item, is to place the view down, go and retrieve all the model annotations, and then use this arrange button here, which allows me to reorientate all my dimensions into a more workable operation. Okay, so that's a couple of things with regard to drawings. Obviously, there's many other things we could show, but we're a bit time constrained. I'm just looking at the clock, and we've only got 10 or so minutes left. So what I'd like to do in the last few minutes is briefly talk to you about a little assembly that's, and I wanted to display this. I might actually update this recording later on. As I said, Inventor and Zoom are not necessarily best of friends. They're both rather graphics hungry and a bit demanding in that sense. So what I'd actually like to do is just have a bit of a look at how the new mirror function works and the button that I mentioned where we can mirror with constraints. Like I said, probably my favorite function in Inventor 2026. It's a really nice option. So this is the front diff of this little tractor here. You can see we've got this front differential arrangement. So with regard to how we use this, as I said, under the mirror options here, we've got an option to go and mirror a number of different ways. We can either mirror a flattened version, and what that will do is, if I was to select this group of components here and say I want to mirror them around this particular plane, we can mirror those across. Oops, I missed the, it's all come across. All right, so if I just pick this, and even if I pick mirror relationships and go next, Inventor goes off and creates all of these parts, and I get this result. So some of the relationships, as you can see, have come across. Not everything here is completely broken. You will notice that the constraints aren't going to particularly come straight across, but what I'm going to do is undo that now and go back and do that again with the new function. And so again, if I pick these same group of items, and we're going to mirror all those items about this mirror plane, but we're going to pick this associative mirror option up here. So this is a completely new button. If I pick the mirror plane as this and pick next and pick OK, what Inventor does, it brings across all of my components now with the respective components and all of their constraints. So in actual fact, the constraints from these items on the right, all the constraints now are mirrored across. As you can see, the hub here is in position, etc., and Inventor is quite happily treating that differential assembly as a correct part. Okay, so look, I think that more or less brings us to the end of today's presentation. I hope what we've presented has been valuable to you and useful, and hopefully there's been some little tips there that you might be able to make use of as you work through your Inventor situation. Please do reach out. As I said, you can send us an email. We're still using our info@A2K Technologies email address if you'd like to come back to us, and very happy to elaborate on any of the functionalities or features that we've talked about during this session, and be more than happy to chat further about any aspects of Inventor.